Leader Fan Radio Network.
Excuse me?
And KFAN.com. 1 minute, 44 seconds past 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. Welcome back. It is another in an endless series of truncated editions of the Bumper to Bumper program. Out at 6:10 last night. Out at 6:10. Guardsy reminds me again tonight. Looking forward to next Monday night's show. I'm assuming we'll be out at 5.
I think that's it.
Pregame show got to start at 5 o'clock.
I think so. Yeah.
Kickoff's usually 7:15. Although it's a postseason game, so I haven't double checked. But we'll keep you apprised. But we got plenty to get to today. I promise you, we will not mail in this program for the next, what would that be, 3 hours and 10 minutes? A 3 hour and 10 minute tour. Guardsy produces, as we said, and Kevin Seifert's going to stop by in studio beginning at about 3:30. Maybe we'll get his reaction to the breaking, although not particularly surprising, Vegas Raiders news. They have fired their head coach, Antonio Pierce. He gets 2 seasons at 9 and 17. He was an interim in, I think he had 9 games as the interim head coach in 2023. So how many open jobs is that now? Is that 5, 6, 7?
I'll have to count them up.
We got a bunch.
There's a few.
It does strike me, I don't know what kind of coach Pierce is. Really, I don't know. But you do wonder sometimes whether much of this comes down to what you have going on at the quarterback position, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the Raiders have been a train wreck there. They've had 9 different guys. They haven't been able to find any kind of answer. Now, what makes the Raiders move interesting is the obvious. Brady is involved with that organization, right? So
part of an ownership
group. So does he convince Vrabel to go to the Raiders, go to Vegas, rather than the assumption that he's going to be the next guy in New England, correct?
He could. People do what Tom Brady wants.
They definitely do.
The Jags, Patriots, Bears, Saints, Jets.
So that's 6. Did you name 6?
Yeah, well, that's 5, and then this is before the Raiders. So
yeah, 6 total. Yeah, there's some. The moral of the story is that average for this time of year? It probably is. It feels a little high. It's a fascinating. We could do an hour on that, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll get into it with Seifert, because you do wonder sometimes whether we kid ourselves about how much of a difference a head coaching change makes. Now, obviously, some coaches are better than others, right? But then you're back to, well, don't you have to marry it a little bit with what kind of talent they have available to them? Fans, do we kid ourselves when we think, get rid of the coach, the next guy's going to be better, got to do it? And do teams sometimes delude themselves that it's going to matter as much as they think it does, or it's that adrenaline rush of we got to get this guy out of here, we got to try somebody else because this guy's been around long enough to where we don't like him anymore, or we don't have the kind of results we want? And then you're back to the ownership question, because the Giants, I believe, are keeping Dable.
They are, and their GM, I think.
Yes, much to the chagrin of a lot of Giants fans. And I think it was one of the Mannings, it might have been Eli, who said, I'm fine with it. You just can't keep changing coaches. It doesn't do anything. And that's the $64,000 question, right? When does it make a difference? And how often is it you're doing it just to do it? Because you're supposed to do it. And you don't like the results, even if deep in the back of your mind you go, I don't know what he had to work with. The guy in New England who just got fired, what's his name? Mayo.
Yep.
He may be awful. I don't have any idea what he is a head coach. But 1 year, inheriting that mess.
Right.
With a weird transition at quarterback where they think they might have their quarterback of the future, but, he wasn't going to be seamless with, who's their QB?
Drake May.
Drake May, exactly. Yep. But they're going to bring somebody else in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we tend to do. And it's trite, but obviously generally speaking, the organizations that do the best are the ones who do not scratch this itch often. They don't do it just for the sake of doing it, to take the pressure off, get the fans back on their side. I'm not saying you never do it, because if it's the Titanic, you don't want the ship to sink if you can stop it from sinking.
Spoiler alert.
Turn it around in another direction, right, to avoid the iceberg. Spoiler alert. But that's the latest from the National Football League, and we may discuss
we don't even know
that with Seifert.
What's going on with Dallas, because Mike McCarthy's contract is up.
Very true, Davey.
He's already been asked to interview, I think, in Chicago. Didn't the Bears request permission to interview him
That's
as
correct.
well?
That's correct.
That hasn't been granted as of this morning, but Jerry Jones still doesn't know what he's going to do there.
Right.
So that could be a possibility.
Yes, that's right.
Mace always talks about it, and he's going to join you by phone tomorrow. You mentioned you don't get the results, so what do? You go buy more hope. It's hope and results. That's
it.
coaching.
There's no question.
And when you don't get the results, you go try to find the next hope. You try to win the press conference. You get the greatest coordinator ever, or a retread, and you try to get more hope.
And what do? You bounce back and forth from players coach to hard ass.
So we've done.
Players coach to hard ass, and back to players coach, and back to hard ass. And that's sort of we've definitely done that over the years. And it does feel a little bit like a game. It doesn't appear that we're going to have to worry. But here's the question. Now that there's 6 openings, maybe we can maximize in a KOC trade. And in doing so,
elevate Flores.
Exactly. You keep Flores because he's saying earlier today, I think and I'm sure Seifert was at this presser, he said, look, I'm going to talk to everybody. He even threw his hat in the ring for the New England job, even though I don't know if he's been asked there yet. As far as we know, the Jets have asked to talk to him. Have any other teams?
I haven't seen other than the Jets,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there are others.
Yeah. So, that'd be a way to save. I mean, just saying. I mean, once upon a time, we look back on Vikings history and we go, Vikings could have kept Tony Dungy if they'd elevated him.
They could have kept Mike Tomlin.
They could have kept Mike Tomlin, right?
Who's been coaching 18 years in Pittsburgh.
Think about it.
1 year as a coordinator here.
And so it doesn't have to even be a repudiation of the value of KOC, but you go, we can get 2 1s and a 2? I don't know how much you can get for him at this point. Maybe a little less than before our last game. Maybe the price will go down again if we lose our first playoff game. That won't help, I don't think. I mentioned off the top of the program that we are indeed your head or shoulders leader. That seems to be the salient question as it pertains to your guy, Sam Darnold, and a belief that it's almost as if it's being presented as if the head coach, KOC, the quarterback whisperer, is going to have to restart the Darnold Reclamation Project. And instead of having all of off season, all of training camp, all of preseason, all of the early part of the season to sort of nurture the best that Darnold had to offer, he's got to do the Reclamation Project in 7 days because of the degree to which Darnold looks stripped down, naked and bare and vulnerable once again. The Sam Darnold who struggled in Detroit is the Sam Darnold who has struggled in the National Football League a number of places, and some of that, too, related to bad infrastructure probably around him. So apparently yesterday, the question was phrased this way. When you're addressing Darnold, is it mindset or mechanics? I say head or shoulders. You could say
like that
brain or the basics, whichever alliteration you want to go with. And his answer was good. First of all, he loved the question because he's KOC. KOC, I
appreciate the question.
He knows how to do this game.
Yep, he does.
He says that is honestly a great way to put it. We'll find out from Seifert who asked that question. It's a little bit of both. Mindset and mechanics can intertwine with previous plays impacting the next. He's right. Obviously, they all fit together. But for me, it's mind. For me, it's head. 100%. I think that's the key to so much of what takes place at the quarterback position. Obviously, if your shoulders aren't in the right place, if you're not planting when you're supposed to, if you're throwing off your back foot, right, you're going to have problems no matter where your head is. But I thought this was the first game in which, from virtually start to finish, Darnold looked like he was sped up, not always by the defense, but by his own head. It looked to me like, how many people out there are familiar with something called an LP, a record?
An LP?
An LP. I think LP stands for long playing record.
Probably right now, like 60-ish%.
You think that many would know
what
an LP is?
Yeah.
So
Vinyl's big.
If you want to go back far enough, there was such a thing as an LP whose speed was 33 1/3, right? And then there was something called the 45 RPMs, and that one was smaller, generally just had like play to hit on one side and then maybe a B hit on the other side. But it was one song on each side, and it was called a 45. 33 was a little longer playing album, right? Might have 3 or 4 or 5 songs, depending on the length of the songs. I'm old enough to remember there used to be an album that went at 78 revolutions per minute.
Wow.
I think those were olden times. I think that goes back to the 50s. I don't think the fidelity was as good. But I felt like Darnold was at 78 RPMs, almost start to finish. And I do believe if your head is in the wrong place, for whatever reason, it's like, oh my God, it suddenly occurs to me, the stakes, and it caught up with me. Ever since I took the water bath, and they made a big deal of that, and then there was the big video of it, and there's the beaming, proud papa off to the side, KOC, saying, this is what I wrought.
This is my kingdom.
This is my deal. Yeah. It just seemed as if everything was too fast and then everything was being thrown too long. And I have to believe if you slow that down and you get your head in a better place, then chances are good that the mechanics are going to follow. Now, maybe some people, maybe the Rich Gansel of the world will say, well, it's just the opposite. If your mechanics are solid and sound, your head might be brought along. But I think I got to believe it starts with the head, don't you?
I do. Because the head is in charge of everything else, in my opinion.
Yes.
And being sped up is a good way to put it. The metaphor is a good way to put it because it did feel like everything was sped up, and the Lions were trying to speed him up. That was the point of the whole deal.
Yes.
And when you're sped up, you do start your mechanics that you've been so accustomed to that he's been, and you look at the other side, Goff, on the other hand, drops back, 1, 2, 3, plants, throws it somewhere. It's complete. Darnold's been doing that all year. He didn't have the same cadence on Sunday night, and that, I think, a lot of it had to do with his head.
I assume the Vikings have a staff psychologist.
It's one. They've probably got a whole wing.
True. You're right about that.
They've got assistant psychologists, associate psychologists.
Because, part of me says, well, let's say maybe you give that guy or gal a chance, but then again, I think you got to be really careful, because if you
don't overreact.
No, if you go, it's like, we're going to have you look at all these 10 images, and can you tell us what the first thing is you see? And if in 4 of them you see a quarterback throwing a pick or overthrowing, we might have further evidence that there's a problem here.
Or if you see that linebacker that just came back with long hair from Detroit.
True, yeah, that might be part of it. I'm sure we can extend this discussion with Seifert as well, as he joins in studio at the bottom of the hour. Good lineup today. I do want to talk some Wolves before we are done. Maybe a little bit of Golden Gophers. Men's basketball team has yet to win a Big Ten game. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And was it double overtime last night?
Double OT.
Double OT. And weren't we like 9 for 40 from the free throw line?
It was 12 of 27.
That's hard to do.
It is.
I mean,
it is.
Even Rudy Gobert would mock that. And
Rudy's been locked in at the line this year.
He's been much better at the free throw line this year. You're 100% correct. And how about the homage, a little sarcastic, by the Wolves head coach to the media jackals after the Wolves victory. So plenty on the plate today. Back in just. Well, our timing was good because the news apparently now official. Your guy, Daniel Jones, will be on the playoff roster for your favorite football team.
Tweet that.
Starting with Monday night, SoFi, Southern California. So the way Guardsy and I figure it, speaking of Sam Darnold's head or shoulders, he's got a half to figure it out. I'm just wondering if Darnold struggles mightily. Let's say at the half we're down 13-3.
Right.
Not out of it, but down 13-3.
Quick question.
Yes.
To that 13-3. Mm-hmm. How many first and goals have we had? How many times have we been inside the 5 with a first and goal?
At least 3.
3? Okay. Got it.
Went for it twice. Took the field goal the other time. Anyway, does Daniel Jones start the third quarter? Just asking. Somebody's going to have to ask KOC if they haven't already. Now, he may well dismiss it. He may say, well, we don't get nonsense like this. Sam Darnold's the guy.
Who's won a road playoff game before? Is that where you were going?
Yes.
Yeah. Who's won a road playoff game?
Well, and I'm telling you right this minute, because this is the way fandom works, if we did an unscientific poll of Vikings fans, I'll ask 2 questions. How many of them, what's the percentage of them that would say, don't wait till the third quarter, start them on Monday night? I bet you it'd be 30%.
I was going to say like 15 for that one.
Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm a little high.
Yep.
But if he's struggling at the half, it's 80%. It's 80% go, yeah, throw him out. What do we got to lose at this point?
Right.
Because the beauty of it is, again, is we have forgotten all of Daniel Jones's warts. Right? Hell, we didn't even see any of them here because he was at his best here. But since then, he has revealed some warts as a quarterback, but we haven't seen him. We haven't been paying attention to him enough. Except, I guess, that he was the QB in the opener, right, when we beat him.
He was.
Correct?
He threw the pick 6 to Van Ginkel.
That's right. I forgot about that. So that's going to be your little media jackals, your sneaky little angle here. Oh, what's Daniel Jones' role going to be on Monday night? Will KOC at least acknowledge, well, he'll be the backup? How then will our regular backup feel about that?
Nick Mullins?
And I guess he doesn't really have much leverage. What's he going to do?
Probably not.
Yeah. Pretty interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, how many couch quazies have hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 64686 to let us know the real reason why they've elevated him to the 53?
No, not many.
Not many? Okay,
No.
well, that's good. And I'm sure Seifert will clarify this, but it has to do with they activate him.
Then they get,
so they can get a compensation pick.
A third-round pick, I think.
Yeah, if somebody signs him or somebody takes whatever the deal is. So I just, before the couch quazies get all mad at us for having fun with the bit, thought we'd clarify.
Yeah.
Wanted to get ahead of the inbox.
I don't think we can rule out the possibility that he's the backup. I don't.
Well, I had him being the backup like 3 weeks in, if you recall.
You did?
Remember?
That's
I said,
right.
let's just do it that way and see. Why not?
Yeah.
Because I actually would prefer to see him as opposed to Mullins, even though Mullins knows the offense and can attack every inch of grass, which is one of KOC's new favorite phrases.
Loves that one, doesn't he?
Every blade of grass.
Yeah. Except
the ones like 4 or 5 yards past the line of scrimmage when they're a zero blitz. We don't attack those, but every other inch is open.
You know what was funny? Tony Dungy came in early.
Yes.
To chat with him.
I watched it.
And then obviously it was in Detroit, and it was a good interview.
Yes.
And then Dungy sent out a bunch of these tweets about just magnificent, operation at TCO. Look at the facilities here. It's state of the art. KOC is killing it. This team is a joy to watch. And then on Sunday night, he picked the Lions to win the game, which is not illegal, but I just thought it was interesting because everything up until then was like, oh my God. I mean, he's on the bandwagon for this. This is going to be the moment. And he picked Detroit to win. Since you brought up record speeds, has anyone else mentioned that KFAN podcasts seem to be sped up? Sounds like the talking is way too fast. Just curious. Are we all talking too fast in the podcast?
Usually when that comes up, it's because someone has accidentally hit the speed themselves on however they listen to their podcast and sped it up themselves to like 1.5 or 2.
Okay.
Other people, if they're having that issue, feel free to text us. But usually when that happens, it's because somebody has unknowingly sped the podcast up or slowed them down themselves.
Greg Williams writes, Tony said it best. One of your favorites, by the way.
Yeah.
Kill the head and the body will die.
I think he used snake.
Did he say snake?
Yeah, kill the head and the snake will die. Yeah, trust me, I remember everything.
You love that quote.
I remember everything from that era.
Yeah.
But he's right.
The fan is crazy. First, get Darnold out of here. Now giving the trade for our head coach the time of day. What does everyone want? It seems like once there's a hint of success, it's, well, let's get rid of everyone. It makes my head swim. That's John that's John, the mail carrier. Yeah, well, that's the nature of fandom. But I'm going to defend it a little bit in the wake of the Lions game, because I even actually heard it a little bit from PA. There's your ultimate litmus test. That he said, I get it. I was as befuddled and confused as anybody. Not that we lost, but the way we lost and the degree to which we lost. And so, it's the only, you really can't have it both ways from a media standpoint. Or media jackals can't be surprised if we spend an entire week building up a game that didn't really need to be built up. It was big. It wasn't manufactured built up. It was legit. And then you're surprised that people might overreact and say, are we seeing the real Darnold now? Now, I think, like I said, the beauty of the game not being until Monday night is by, what day should I pick? Would it be Thursday? I'm going to be a little more conservative. I would say by Friday. By Friday in this town, it's very possible overconfidence is going to be our only
I think
enemy.
we'll be back by then.
I really do. It'll be like, oh, wait a minute. Let's get real here. Yeah, the Rams can do some things, but I mean, what have they really done? Look at their point differential compared to ours. Yeah, they beat us, but look at some of the teams they lost to and the way they lost some of those games. And we'll figure some things out. We were due to play a bad game, and we finally played it, and it was the worst time to play it. But we'll be fine. So I think by the Friday football feast, I think it'll be, once again, overconfidence is our only enemy.
I agree with you. I was wondering about that yesterday when the bounce back was going to happen. Because there is a 17 weeks before this last game sample size of some pretty good football. Yes. Certainly the last 2 months have been spectacular, including from the quarterback. So at some point you do have to fall back on that a little bit and remember it's a 14.
Yes.
It doesn't even feel to me, and we've talked about this all season long, we had more fear and loathing as the 13-4 2 years ago was happening because it was also horseshoe. It all felt crazy. The game in Buffalo, the game against the Colts, the turnovers when they happened. This one felt much more authoritative on their way to 14 victories, so you could feel good about it.
More football conversation is coming up with Seifert. Louis is a Tuesday regular, and he's going to join us a little earlier than he generally does. So Louis will be with us at 4:30 today, out at 6:10 again. Kevin Seifert is in studio. We'll explore all of it next here. It's halftime, SoFi, Monday night. Rams are up 13-3. Vikings have had 3 trips into the red zone, gone for it and failed on 2 of them.
I already know where you're going.
And kicked a field goal on the other. So game's not, it's 10 points. Defense is playing pretty well, 13-3. Is Daniel Jones starting the second half for the Vikings?
I don't think so, because if I had to guess, he's going to be the emergency third quarterback, which means you can't play unless the other 2 guys are unavailable. But if your question would
that's no fun.
Would Nick well, unless they surprise everyone and make him the backup and have Nick Mullins be the emergency third quarterback. I do not believe that is the plan.
You guys have to clarify that.
Yeah, we will tomorrow when we speak to the head coach, if not earlier. But I do not anticipate Daniel Jones being the backup. But I will say that I asked O'Connell that 2 weeks ago.
I remember that. Yeah.
I asked him 2 weeks ago, are you going to do this? And he's like, well, we got to figure it out. And then I said, but he didn't rule it out. And I said, well, if that does happen, will that influence the depth chart? And
he wouldn't say.
And he said, well, it's all to be discussed. But you could argue that it already has, because he's displaced the third quarterback, Brett Rippon, who was waived today. Okay, so logistically, for those who haven't heard, Jones activated on the playoff roster, but more than anything else, what this does is it opens the door, correct, to if Jones signs someplace else next year, we get a 3? Is that correct? Probably not a 3, but
okay.
I guess it would depend on what he signed for. But,
right.
In order to qualify for the formula that determines the compensatory picks, you have to be the player who departed has to be on the 53-man roster at some point. And so they consulted with the NFL rules, and the playoffs count. So he will count towards their compensatory formula, but it doesn't just mean it's not a 1-for-1 thing. Like it's like departures and arrivals are all combined into the formula, and if the arrivals or if the departures outweigh the arrivals, then you get compensatory picks. If it's the other way around, and we expect the Vikings are probably going to have to be pretty active in free agency this year because of their previous drafts, then you don't necessarily get picks. And so we'll see if that happens, but every little bit counts, and that's really what this was about, to my understanding.
Kevin Seifert is with us in studio, ESPN and ESPN.com. If you have questions, some folks already have supplied them. 64686 is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Well, first of all, did you ask the question? Let me find it. Just to double check here. Who asked the question that got a really complimentary answer from the head coach? That is honestly a great way to put it. And the question was, do we address at this point Darnold's mindset or mechanics? I went with head or shoulders.
Yeah.
Same thing. Did you ask the question?
No, that was Jim Suhan.
Good question.
We had to bring out one of the old guns to ask good questions in the press room. But yeah, he asked that, and I think he used it today in his column.
He did.
And you're right. That was a good answer from O'Connell, and I think it's true. Like, I understand. I heard
I lean head.
I lean, and that that can still be true, but the head then creates some of the lack of discipline from footwork or fundamentals or however you want to put it. So, I think that like the order of operations is most clearly that head to shoulders, but, they were both involved.
So from your perspective, the cliche is if a defense is doing its job, they sped him up. I felt like Darnold seemed sped up on his own, and then Detroit did a good job, I think, of also having something to do with it. How do we obsess over it? I mean, do we say, well, no, that's too big of a drop? Do we say, well, he's probably was due for a bad game, circumstances? Lions are a pretty good team. They had a good plan, which the Vikings, I never thought, did a very good job to adjust to. How fundamental should be the concern for Vikings fans about Sam Darnold's mind and his mechanics?
It wasn't the first time it's come up, and I think that's kind of the misnomer that this is the first time where he's had some issues from a fundamental standpoint. And you go back to that game in Jacksonville where he threw 3 interceptions. And so what the postmortem of that game was, not so much that he was throwing to the wrong guy, making the wrong decisions, but that his throws were inaccurate to the point where they were being intercepted. And really, when he looked at it the next day, he said again, like, I made the right decisions. I just need to put the ball in a better place. And so
he could have thrown 2 picks in this game.
Yeah, and so like really the only difference is these weren't maybe they were so off that they weren't able to be intercepted either. Although the one I think you're referencing, the throw to Justin Jefferson, that could have been intercepted, and so we'd be talking about that as well. So they were fortunate that it didn't happen. But so it's not the first time this has come up, and so he has managed to get him, and I don't know that he looked as sort of frenetic as he did in Jacksonville, but he definitely, for reasons that probably started in the head, whether he felt like he had all 3 of those interceptions in Jacksonville were on balls to Justin Jefferson, and that's when we were sort of in that moment of like, he's got to get, that sometimes you just got to throw to Justin and trust him to catch it, and so, but you also have to put it in the right spot. And he didn't do it then, and the balls got intercepted. He didn't do it the other night, and they just were incomplete. So I think that unfortunately for him, there's some precedent for him reverting and then finding a way to get back on track. And that is what he needs to do this week.
Does that in total, from your perspective, having been there, explain the futility in the red zone?
No.
Or is there a lot more to it?
Yeah. Like there's 2, from the Lions' defensive perspective, it wasn't just that they were getting pressured. Like they were in super aggressive coverage mode. Man to man, which is why the Vikings were throwing so much, because when you're in man to man against Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, TJ Hockenson, I think most people say, oh, that's the right look to throw. And we talked last week, if you're a good quarterback, you want to be blitzed because there's answers, and that means that there's going to be guys open. And so, the other part of it was that those defenders were knocking the Vikings receivers off their spots to a point where I think those guys should shoulder, and I'm sure did, part of the responsibility, because it's never just one guy, even if it's the quarterback. There were balls that were difficult to catch, but could have been caught. I think if you look at Justin Jefferson in that game, you saw a pretty frustrated guy, and I asked Wes Phillips about that today, the offense coordinator. Like, that kind of coverage is designed mostly to get you off your spots and to outmuscle you and all that, but it also gets in your head. And like, the amount of time he spent complaining to officials or being frustrated, the balls that Sam was throwing to him were really tough balls to catch, and like, you need to be at 100% to do that. And if your distraction level is even a few percentage points away because of all the holding and pushing and pulling that's not getting called, because they're not going to call it on every play, it's just the way it is, then maybe that makes it a little bit tougher for you to make some of those catches. So I think there's some responsibility shouldered there. And I think while I understand what O'Connell was saying in terms of like, when it's single man-to-man coverage, that's a good passing look. At some point, you have to look at it and say, but are we executing it?
Exactly.
And they weren't.
No.
And I'm sure that he's, thought through all that, but I do think that like it's totally understandable that everyone's coming down on Sam Darnold, but like, I don't even think you need to be there to see it was other things as well.
No, and I think we played it in one of the talking points yesterday. I thought it was one of Collinsworth's better moments analyzing the game, and it was Sam's under heat. I don't know if he got sacked in this play or just got punished, but he basically said, let's look at this play. Look, if we play this back, no receivers are coming up. No, you need receivers to start cutting off routes. He's getting killed. They want to do the deep drop back. And again, in theory, against a man-to-man, that's what you're salivating, right? You're frothing at the mouth. But if you're not executing or your quarterback's off, then there is such a thing as saying, all right, let's do some dump offs. Let's at least try a few other things. Not even, mentioning the running game. Maybe you could have gone to that a little bit more. But to me, that was the biggest. I thought that was the coaching mismatch. That in theory, yeah, man-to-man, our receivers will kill you. And in effect, their head coach said, yeah, we think they were going to kill us. That's why we went all out, because we thought if we sat back, we were going to get barbecued, right? Yeah. And it worked to the point where it either rushed Darnold or it seemed to impact, maybe it impacted the physicality, impacted the receivers as well. And that, I guess, is the part that surprised me, that there wasn't more of a willingness at some point to say, we put together these game plans, but there's got to be a plan B to what we do every week, right? If the main one's not working, and I never felt like the Vikings got to that.
No, and this was one case where like being there does help, because being up in the press box, you see the whole field, and there were guys running open for so much of the time. And I get what O'Connell's saying. He's like, we've seen it so much where we've connected on those plays. I really thought the next one he was going to get, and I think that he said something pretty similar to that. But it just never settled down, and there became a point where, and maybe the game was lost by that point, where it became clear that like what was going to happen was going to happen. And so they've not been a big screen team.
No, that's
over
true.
The years.
Yeah.
They've not been a big quick game team. They have those plays, and we've seen them. We've seen that little dump off to Justin Jefferson with a couple guys in front of him, and he gets 7-8 yards. And we've seen that. They have that play. They have screens. They have shorter routes. But it's so tempting when you see those guys running wide open, and even like the deep pass to Jordan Addison. I think if a little better ball placement, he runs under it, and that's the same one that Orlovsky highlighted where Justin Jefferson was open in the corner as well. And so, like, you see all those guys running open, and like I get the temptation to say like we only need a couple of those, and we're back in it.
Yeah, that part's very true. I did think you during the game. You had one tweet that I thought was your attempt to sort of apologize for the Vikings receivers' difficulties. I mean, you threw out there the old, it is the Lions, and they're very handsy, and they're getting called on it sometimes, and this is a crew that's that historically calls a bunch. So it looked to me like you're trying to hand the Vikings an alibi at that point.
Well, the confluence of those facts, I think we talked about it last week, that you had the team that's gotten called for the most defensive pass interference calls in the NFL, and you have an offense that that gets lots of those calls because of the deep throws and the incompletions that on some of those that they've had to Addison and Jefferson in particular. And you have a crew that like, and that means something. Like, teams track that, they analyze it. But you also, at the beginning of every game, it's like same as in basketball. You test it out and you see what what they're going to be calling tonight, basically. And they weren't calling enough of them to get them off of it.
No.
And the Vikings weren't making enough plays. And it's not only because of the refs. Like if somebody grabs you and holds you, that's not like the end all be all. It means, I guess we're not getting a completion. There's ways. And I asked Wes Phillips about that today. And like, what are there's techniques involved in like getting people off of you, and they weren't able to do that. And so, that adds to it as well. It's not just that you're just assuming eventually refs will make those calls and the Lions will feel like they need to back off as a result. So, but those confluence of those facts like indicated that that's a pretty surprising development that happened over the course of the game that very much impacted the outcome.
Is there any reason to believe, I've not studied the All-22 regarding the Rams' defensive approach, style. I don't even remember that much about the game during the regular season. You do. That's your job, and you were there. But, the assumption that, the Rams are taking a look at that tape and that they're going to try to do all the same things. Well, it's often not that easy because of personnel, style, whatever. Can the Rams bring a lot of the same things that the Lions did successfully defensively?
Well, the Rams have probably a better front four than the Lions do, so they might be able to get enough pressure that way. And they did in some cases, with the infamous face mask. We remember that one. Yeah. And like, that was also a time when Darnold was taking a lot more sacks than he did towards the end of the year. And so, that's something to consider as well. But like, I guess we could say that the Lions found the formula for breaking Sam Darnold, which is to rush the hell out of him and then hold his receivers. But like, I think most teams, if they could, I don't know too many quarterbacks that only the very best in the league, don't have their performance changed by a heavy pass rush.
Guardsy and I were talking about this yesterday, and he brought up there was it's a classic Lions play offensively, a great play by Goff. Metellus comes off the left side of the defense untouched. He's going straight at Goff, and Goff got rid of the ball and made a nice throw. Was it a third down? I think it might have been. It was a big conversion, as I recall it. And that to me is...
It was fourth down.
Was it fourth?
Yeah,
maybe. You're right. It was fourth down. Good point. That's the contrast to me, is they seem to know what to do. Now, it's a different offense. And you're trying to get different things done. And Goff is more accomplished at this point than Darnold, certainly. So maybe you can ask him to do more things. But it was to me, that was so pertinent to this whole discussion is they're going to... they want big plays, and they get them some from Gibbs, and they love going downfield. But basically, it looked like what they did is, we're just going to move. We're going to if you want to do that, we'll do the 5-yard play.
Yeah.
And another thing that drives me crazy: have we ever, when it's 3rd and 7, in a spot where there's a chance we're going to go for it on 4th down, have we ever done what the Lions almost always do, run the ball on 3rd and 7?
We talked about that. The Lions were like, it was a 3rd and 8 or something. Why are they running? Well, they must be going for it on 4th down. The Vikings haven't been a 4th down.
No, that's
like
true.
He hasn't. Like, if you just look at somebody, actually, one of the analytics guys on X does regularly updates the 4th down aggressiveness chart, and the Vikings have pretty consistently been on the less aggressive. Yeah. So O'Connell, everybody has this idea O'Connell's just like pass, guys, young, gets the analytics, and he does, but he's not like beyond average in terms of how often he goes for it on 4th down. And so what those red zone ones were pretty unusual for him. And so no, they don't often run the ball thinking they're going to go for it on 4th down. But I don't know how many times they're in that mindset in general. I don't think his mindset on 4th down is close to Dan Campbell, and for good and for bad.
Hey, did the late in the game, the Lions have a chance to kick a field goal to go ahead by 3 scores. They go to the line of scrimmages if they're going to go for it on 4th and whatever it was. I think it was 4. And even on the TV broadcast, Collinsworth was like, I know it's Campbell. I know what he likes to do, but I kind of kicked the field goal. And, of course, that was the play where Goff got the Vikings to jump offside.
Yeah.
Do we know whether Campbell intended to actually go for it, or that was the whole entire strategy that we're going to try to get him to jump? If we don't get him to jump, we'll take a timeout and we'll kick the field goal?
I do not know. But that wouldn't have been a terrible idea, but like there's been lots of times over the years when I thought, oh, there's no way they're actually Dan Campbell is actually going for it, and he does. So like I wouldn't be shocked if he were planning to just kill the game right there, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, that makes some sense. A lot of good text coming in. Kevin Seifert is in studio for the hours. Bemidji guy wants to know if you think Darnold should have sat once they knew the game was out of reach. That it was, would there have been, I guess you could have. I don't know that he was getting, I guess he was getting pummeled pretty good.
At the end, there was some kind of, he got hit.
Yeah, that's right.
He was limping around, and there was
was there a pinky issue too?
Well,
that's old. Yeah.
That's old. Like somebody landed on his foot, and he was limping around, and I think there was like a review going on. Mm-hmm. There was some kind of official timeout, and the trainer, athletic trainer, came out for water, but he was also talking to Darnold for a while, and he was kind of following him as Darnold tried to walk it off. And like, there was a point where I said, well, maybe like, it doesn't look like he's necessarily like hurt, but like that is enough, and maybe get Mullins in there, but they did not.
The Rams, the Vikings are a better team. Most people would agree, correct?
Than the Rams?
Than the Rams, the Rams of Anaheim as they used to play.
Yeah, the Vikings are favored for this game.
They are favored.
That's the
for
conventional
now.
Wisdom.
Yeah. I think it's a tricky game, though, because I do think they've got a good coach. I think you mentioned their defensive line can be a problem.
Yeah.
And I do sense these guys kind of know how to play. On the other hand, I don't want to overrate them because their record is not very good, and they've lost to some bad teams. They've had a very odd season.
Yeah, if I'm the Vikings and they go out there and lose that game, I'm pretty disappointed. Not just for the obvious reasons of the season being over and the playoffs not going anywhere, but like I think in their minds they kind of said this publicly as well. Like that first game, they had just played the Lions. It was a very physical, emotional game, and then 4 days later they have to turn around and fly halfway across the country, play the Rams on a Thursday night, and were just maybe not at their best. And so I think that has been sort of their thought about how that period of their season went, which to me implies that they think that on an equal footing in terms of rest and all that, which it's not going to be because the Rams rested a bunch of their starters. But beyond that, a lot of good that did them against the Vikings and against the Lions. But so I think that they will walk onto that field pretty confident. But as we talked about last week, the three teams that have beat the Vikings this year, the Rams and twice the Lions, have been probably the two best quarterbacks that they faced. And in terms of like diagnosing the intricate things that they do and being able to stay cool under pressure, they did not pressure Stafford much in that first game. But when they did, there was that Jonathan Grenard had him in his grasp, and Stafford at age 97 or whatever he is spins away and throws a touchdown pass. And so like one of the few times they did get to him, he was able to get away. And so, Stafford is capable of playing like a Hall of Famer at any given, I don't know if he will be one, right? But he has had games where he looks like one, and he's capable of doing that. And if he does that, that will be a very difficult team to beat.
What did you make of the Flores admission yesterday regarding, or is it today rather, regarding the Rams wide receiver core for the regular season matchup?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the significance of that. Like, I think he was just asked, were you surprised that Puka Nacua played as well as he did? And if people don't remember, like, he had been hurt, Nacua had been hurt, and at the beginning of that week, it was like, I don't know, like if he's going to be eligible. He was eligible to come off the IR and play, but I don't know. They didn't practice that much because it was a 4-day week for the Rams too. And turned out that not only was he activated, but he played like the entire game and killed him. Like he was just great. And today, Brian Flores says, we were actually quite honestly surprised by that, and there was some scrambling going on. And so that, like, I appreciate the honesty and in trying to interpret why he said that and acknowledge that, maybe like that's his way of telling the team, hey, look, when we're ready for this guy, it'll be a different story. Like, don't worry about it. Be confident. And so like that could be part of it. I don't know if there was anything behind the scenes that led them to be convinced that he wasn't playing when in fact he was. But it was a rare moment where, like, usually, coaches are always saying, well, we prepared for all contingencies, and basically he was saying they did not.
Top of the hour pause, more with Seifert when we come back. Louis will join us at about 4:30 We will have a top 5 at 5 today, right? Nothing to get in the way of a top 5 at 5.
I will be ready.
Outstanding.